Hi everyone, and welcome to the start of season 9 of Behind Your Eyes. And in this first episode, I have the wonderful Ulrika as my guest. So, hi Ulrika, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. I'm Ulrika Sullivan. I'm an intuitive spiritual life coach and a galactic astrologer. I have been my past, if you're interested, I've been 20 years plus in the corporate world prior to making a complete shift to becoming a coach and a healer and astrologer. So it's one of those stories where a complete shift has happened, and I'm happy now to kind of help others along the way as far as who wants to make shifts or want to gain some more self-awareness and insight about themselves and to find that life balance and life purpose.
Well, I always start with the same question, and that is a sincere, how are you doing?
I'm great today. I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you, and it's Friday today, so that's always a good day.
Yeah.
In my book at least. And yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Great. Well, you just mentioned you were like a scientist, and you said you were a bit overworked and unfulfilled. So, when did you realize change was needed?
So for me, it started probably around 2014, 2015, when I found myself. I know now that I was completely disconnected from who I truly was and my life force, so to say, my inspiration. And like many of us, some of us have been following kind of a template of what success looks like. And that sometimes takes us down a path of not really being aligned with our natural energy. That's how I look at it now. But in hindsight, yes, I realized when I didn't really know, for example, somebody asked me one day, Ulrika, what do you do for fun? And I didn't have an answer. I was completely kind of identifying myself with my career. I had a young family at the time, and multitasking, it just absorbed my whole energy. And at the end of the day, I was exhausted. So I realized it was actually the universe. I know now that it was very carefully orchestrated a shift for me where I had the choice to say, okay, do I want to really discover who I'm truly am and what I'm here to do? Or do I want to kind of go another cycle of exhaustion and the same story?
Yeah.
And this was around 2015 ish. And there was a lot of synchronicities that happened that I didn't realize then was synchronicities, but I allowed myself to follow what was shown to me rather than having the plan and following kind of the steps that you're supposed to. So that led me down a path to coaching, to energy healing, to astrology, and becoming an author. And it's been a wonderful journey so far.
Yeah, that shift is massive though, because when you're a scientist, you depend on statistics and facts and mind work, but now you're an intuitive coach, so it's really a heart-led life and business, and intuitive, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to know how a bit. Can you give us a bit of a hint, like how that transition went?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the word transition, because that is really what it is. It's a transition over time, but I think that at the very bottom of things is that willingness to discover something new about ourselves. Like I was genuinely curious about what else was out there, because I wasn't fulfilled. I realized that then there's got to have to be more for me, right?
Yeah.
And that generated curiosity within me. And I think that was really the seed for this transition, where I have discovered my true talents and gifts in phases, right? I add things here and there that really, build up the unique combination of what I'm here to bring forward. And I think that everyone has that opportunity to truly go within, because that's the first step to really slow down and start to listen to our desires and our inner voice, basically. And that's a practice, and we can't just, like, it's not a flip of a switch, which we often want to, like, I want my life to change, right, from one day to another, and I'm all happy. So no, that's not really how it works for most of us.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah. So this transition for me really allowed me to change my rhythm over the course of the day as well, which now is slower. Before, it was like this go, everything was planned out and back to back and all of that. But the pace, just that shift in pace of course of the day, allowed me to allow time for listening and sitting in meditation or any way where we can connect with our true self in silence is a source of information.
And it's funny that you said earlier, like, you were given a lot of signs, and you saw synchronicities that now were signs and synchronicities, but at the time you were so not open to receiving that you didn't even notice they were there. So how do you open yourself up to realizing, okay, there is more, and yes, it actually is a sign or a synchronicity and not just a coincidence? Because we tend to be, a bit too realistic sometimes. We like to think like that, and don't really open ourselves up to things like that and messages from the universe or signs and synchronicity. So how do you open yourself up to that?
Yeah, it starts really with where we put our focus. Because if we put our focus to, okay, I have a plan, it's going to look exactly like this, and I need to know the steps to take to get there, right? And that's how we have taught many times how to problem solve, right? The logical way of getting from A to B. What I'm suggesting here, if somebody's curious about how to really shift this, is to start to focus on appreciating the unknown and what's not visible.
But that's hard for the logical mind, of course.
Oh, super hard for the logical mind. That doesn't work. It's like, how do you know? It's not, you can't see it, right? But it's a focus on actually start to notice. And when we start to notice, we are actually in a energy of receiving. Because when we receive a sign, let's say it's something that shows up unexpected. So once we start to kind of notice and tune into unexpected things, maybe a bird that's flying, I actually got a very strong sign this week that I have to share. There was an owl that flew on the low range right over my head in a straight line. I mean, how that's a sign, right? So and this is happening in different ways. Often the animal kingdom is very much involved in the signs and synchronicities, but also numbers, for example. And how we can open up to notice this is basically to shift the focus from the step-by-step plan to the unknown and the unseen. And that's a choice if we want to start to, because everyone is getting signs and
Yeah.
synchronicities.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's all over the place. But in my past, I had I wasn't aware of that. It even was something that you could pay attention to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. True.
does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about being in that receiving and like open energy. And because when I've started to notice it and be more open to it, it's like, oh, well, they're everywhere.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's to me the beauty of it.
Yeah. And in the mix here is often our ego, right? Our ego has
Yeah.
a vision of what we want and how it's supposed to look like and what needs to look like. And
Yeah.
that's often hindering us from being open to that unknown. So
Yeah.
it's important to gain self-awareness of like where do I really apply my ego, and where can I kind of soften my ego so that I can sit and notice the things that may not always be seen and known.
Yeah, because when I sit in meditation, I love to connect with my, I call them my team of light, my spirit guys. And I try to meditate and quiet the mind a bit, but the ego is always the first to like scream. And then when you
Right.
go a bit deeper and meditate a bit longer, that's when I get into a bit more of a receptive mode. So it's all
Yeah.
about quieting the mind, quieting the ego, especially. And yeah, all the lies the ego is telling you. Because I think the ego is mostly anxiety based anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's also one thing that I also come across a lot is that it's a practice.
No, yeah, for
It's
sure.
something we have to kind of dedicate time to, if not
Mhm.
every day, but very regularly. It's not something that we can just like, okay, on Mondays, I'm going to do this. And the rest of the week, I'm going back to my, my way of being. No.
Mhm.
So that's why also it's a transition over time that what we focus on, we can also expand. So let's say we want to live more from the heart and
Mhm.
connected with our intuition. We have to kind of intentionally expand that.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I was connecting with spirit, it didn't like the messages didn't come in the way that I expected. And to me, it was like I was a bit disappointed. And then literally like an hour later, this thought popped in my mind like, what if it doesn't always go the way you want it or expect it to? So sometimes you have to also like expect the unexpected.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a training, that's for sure. And I would love to know a bit more about your book because I see it behind you.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I have a copy here. It's called Wisdom Beyond What You Know. And the
Mhm.
subtitle is actually exactly what we were talking about here. It's how to shift from being driven by the mind to living from the heart and intuition. So it
Yeah.
really is. And this book, actually, I realized in hindsight that it's more of a channeled information that
Mhm.
really people need to hear and know, because it gives a process, it gives steps. I call it
Mhm.
the 7 actionable inner shifts
Mhm.
to make that shift from the logical mind to living from the heart. And
Mhm.
yeah, I can highly recommend it, obviously.
Yeah. And what are some of the most like important changes that a heart-driven or intuitive life has brought you so far?
Yeah, it's it really has given me both insight of my habits and you know, I would say, habits, and also but also inherited patterns that we ancestral uh, sometimes ancestral heritage can be negative, right? It can
Mhm.
influence us in a negative way, but it's also a positive thing, right? But
Yeah.
the negative parts are often in habits and patterns that are not serving us anymore, such
Mhm.
as people pleasing, or living from the ego, for example. And even that drive for success
Mhm.
is the path I was step by step, the template, I call it, as far as
Mhm.
what success is.
Yeah.
All of those things, it has given me a chance to identify that and actually make a choice at the end of the day to keep it or to let it go. And the other parts are, getting into awareness of what heart-centered living is, which is what we've talked about, for example, the signs and synchronicities, but also it has allowed me to get familiar with how my energy works. And many people, I get a lot of questions sometimes. What do you mean by how energy works or how you run energy? It's basically, let's say you're coming home exhausted after a work day or after a big party with a lot of people. It means that we're giving our energy away. And that happened for me, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But energy awareness is about learning how we can protect our energy and keep it. And maybe even adjust situations and relationships to those that we actually can stay in our power and stay in our energy. And that raises our awareness of our own sovereignty, if you will.
Yeah, because especially I think as when you're an intuitive or also when you're an empath, it can be quite hard to protect your own energy and have those healthy boundaries. So what would you advise someone to have those boundaries and to protect your own energy?
Yeah, the absolute first tip I give to anyone is to utilize energy systems that are already out there. Let's say, for example, human design or the gene keys or astrology. And that's just a few of the energy systems that I work with, but there's so much information about our individual personal energy imprint, if you will, that we can obtain from getting a reading or reading about it ourselves, right? That's the first step, to start investigating, like, what is it about me that is specific in terms of how I run energy? That's the first step. And often what I do is to help others to interpret this. But the second step is really to take that out in situations and test drive. For example, if we really are anxious going to work and we maybe have colleagues that we don't get along with, or there's some annoying colleague that, is always the draining one.
We've all been there.
Yeah. And there are ways that we can actually put an energy shield around us, and even checking in with our own energy and tune into before we go to work. That way we can be more empowered, because it's all about empowering ourselves, even energetically, right? So and then it's to basically do realistic life changes that are more supportive of how we are aligning with our natural energy based on what we've learned. So it's, in summary, it's really this journey of self-discovery, self-awareness, and adjust our life so that we can stay balanced energetically.
And how important is self-love in all this?
Oh yeah. it's like, it's the foundation of peace, inner peace. In my opinion, it's something that many of us have to work on all the time, right? Because that ego is very strong, and many times we apply self-judgment, or we feel other people's judgment, or that's just an example. But it's that self-love, once we can source it within ourselves, that is really the inner peace that we're talking about, that many of us are like looking for or want to stay in, and so on.
I think it's always the foundation you can build yourself upon.
Yes. And it's hard to actually be of authentic service unless we can see ourselves in that self-love and actually source it without any condition.
And do you have a favorite way to joy of to express your self-love. I was always like a technique, but of course it's not like a self-care technique. But
so for me personally, it's to have a spiritual practice. And I also channel my guides just like you are. So that's part of also the internal validation that I receive, that I'm on the right path, or, you know, that inner messaging system that I can always rely on, that nobody can take away from me, is a way to show and source that self-love. But on a daily basis, it really is my spiritual practice. I meditate, do yoga, I do some cards, I read my astrology. Like it's a time where I can connect with my true self. And I think that really is beautiful. It's something that I can bring anywhere, right? So
yeah,
there are no conditions to what needs to not be good weather outside. It doesn't have to depend on another person.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's for me also. It's such an important way to have a ritual or a routine that is just for me, and I can do it whenever I want to, whenever I feel the need to, especially because my ritual changes every day based on what I need that day.
Yes.
So, and I think
Yes.
that's the essence. You don't have to force it because then it's not really helpful, of course. I think always ask yourself, okay, what do I need today?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I love
Yeah.
that
And
you're, oh, sorry, please go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say because you're also an astrologer, so I would love to know how that expresses itself in your life.
Oh, goodness. When I first came across astrology quite a few years ago now, I connected with it. I started with tropical Western traditional astrology, if you
Hmm.
will. But I clicked with it right there. I picked it up really quickly, and I started to kind of just do readings for myself.
Hmm.
And but then I think it was a year and a half ago now, I came across galactic astrology, and which really combines the intuitive work
Hmm.
with astrology and connecting, I call it the outer layer of traditional astrology, where we look
Hmm.
at fixed stars and galactic points and celestial bodies. And what I realized then, it's like that's the perspective that I'm here to help others connect with, that multidimensional self that is so much bigger. The expansion of self-perception is really what it's about. And
Hmm.
looking into our soul's journey, our galactic heritage,
Hmm.
is yeah. So astrology is a huge part of my practice,
Hmm.
and often it's an activation, right? It's a download for somebody to get a reading, but then the work is really to integrate that
Hmm.
perspective in our daily life, and that's where the coaching comes in
Hmm.
over time.
Yeah.
So it really is acceleration. I
Yeah.
call it, because it's that opening to a bigger self perspective
Mm.
of who we are. So
Yeah.
I find it very, very powerful.
And to you, what can we learn the most from looking within?
I think it is that self-love and connecting to, our connecting ourselves to the all.
Mm.
Because part of it is also um, to look within, is to also connect with everything,
Yeah.
the universe. And that's really the discovery that we are often making, that
Hmm.
we are part of the universe. We are part of it all,
Hmm.
not just being a body in here where we live and go to work and all of that, right? There's
Yeah.
so much more that we can tap into and be experiencing. But also, I think that going within is really the peace, the quietness, the serenity that we are
Yeah. We are a
in our
piece
core
of the
essence.
universe. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my favorite like ways to like express self-love to myself as well. Like you said, it's like that spiritual practice, and that knowing that we are part of a bigger whole. We're not just individuals. It's very hopeful or strengthening when I
Mm.
feel a bit, down. We all have our days where we're just not that great in our energy. So, but knowing that, it's like, you have your own like galactic support system.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that there's always a higher, bigger perspective. Because
Yeah.
I find that, when I have those days when I was like, I always am reminded of that bigger perspective. And as soon as I connect with that, it's like, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it's when we get into our little box there, the mind and the ego wants us to stay in our little box. And that's kind of can be difficult sometimes when we are, yeah. So the bigger picture is really healing for many to
Yeah,
receive.
exactly. Yeah, and you know that people say, well, everything happens for a reason, but I definitely believe in that, like the good and the bad, because I've had both. So I know
Yes.
that also like the bad times were my biggest lessons. And that's the main reason why I also am a coach right now, and that I do these interviews, because they're so important for me, because I've been on the other side. So,
Yes. That is
yeah.
truth right there. That it's that insight of the lows that we also source the highs with, and vice versa. So yeah, that duality is what we're dealing with here on earth, but it's all a lesson. It's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my last question is also always the same, and that is, when are you at your happiest?
Oh, that's when I am the happiest is when I am in nature,
Mhm.
when I am in a company and conversation like this,
Mhm.
where I feel a connection and a co-creation happening. And,
Mhm.
you know, if I give you an example, because my reference from my past, let's say, was very disconnected from happiness
Mhm.
on a daily basis. But now I come out of my work and conversations like this
Mhm.
energized.
Yeah.
And that is happiness for me, to feel that harmony in conversation, but also with nature. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's really is an existence on a daily basis nowadays.
Yeah.
I'm at my happiest. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you.